Well, the unrest we're seeing is spreading still across the Arab world. It's escalating as deadly security crackdowns continue. The death toll still climbing. In Libya, the leader there, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, is confronting the most serious challenge to his rule in 42 years. But he's now saying Libya will stop cooperating with Europe over illegal migration unless the European Union itself stops encouraging the protesters. Now, the people who live in Libya's second biggest city, that's Benghazi, about 1,000 kilometers from Tripoli, have told AlJazeera that once again they've heard heavy gunfire. The number killed is thought to be round about 200. A doctor telling us that more than 300 young men, one as young as 13, have been treated, many with heavy machine gun wounds. Well, the capital, Tripoli, is now under curfew after earlier reports that a group of protesters were heading to the presidential palace, attempting to burn it down. In Bahrain, opposition protesters have laid down a list of demands which include releasing prisoners and giving residents a greater role in politics. The US Secretary of State, Mrs. Clinton, has now thrown her weight behind calls for political reform. And protesters have clashed with pro-government supporters in Yemen outside the capital's university, Sana'a University. Since it all started, 6 people have died in the last 10 days or so. And thousands, this is a new name here when it comes to street protests, have taken to the streets in Morocco. In Kuwait, protesters were injured after riot police used tear gas on demonstrations. And in Iran, police reportedly used tear gas in an attempt to break up gatherings in the capital. We're off to Rabat in just a moment, and we're going to hear from our correspondents in Bahrain and Yemen. First, here's Imran Khan with a close look at the scale of the unrest in Libya.
The streets of Benghazi on Sunday, a building burns. Just hours earlier, Ahmed, an eyewitness, describes the scene.
A lot of gun artillery and a lot of gunshots were heard. I cannot put you can hear it right now, but 5 minutes ago it was really loud and clear. And also on the south side, which is 3 kilometers south of the army barricade, which is the police academy, it's burning now. It's definitely burning, big black smoke coming out.
In the morgue, one man takes a last look at his relative and murmurs he was not armed. Also from Benghazi, this video claims to show what protesters believe is a mercenary, a hired killer, contracted by the Libyan regime to attack demonstrators. Unrest is spreading across the country. Here in Al-Bayda, thousands gather near the main mosque, another city rocked by days of protests against the country's leadership. Chanting, "There's no God but Allah," mourners carry the body of one of those killed. And there's more chaos. Anti-Gaddafi graffiti sprayed on walls, and a voice through a loudspeaker saying, "There's no state here." Reports of casualties are running high and constantly rising. The city's hospital overwhelmed, the morgues filled with bodies, and more are still coming. On Libyan state television, the first sign that the country might be in difficulty. Images of burning buildings, a result of the protests. It's a change from what they'd been airing earlier. No mention of any anti-government protests, instead showing supporters of the Libyan leader on the streets of Tripoli. But while thousands remain on the streets in various cities across the country, it's becoming harder and harder to ignore their calls. Imran Khan, Al Jazeera.
Well, those are the scenes in Libya. Let's go to Bahrain. Our man James Bass is in the capital, Manama. He says the protesters, at the moment at least, are not interested in a dialogue with the government.
There seems to be a disconnect between the opposition politicians and the people. And let me tell you, David, when that opposition politician finished his interview and headed back down into the crowd, we followed him. And the crowd came up to him and said, "You're talking about dialogue, you keep talking about dialogue." He tried to explain himself, and the crowd around him said, "We don't want dialogue. We can't talk to these people after what has happened. We want the government removed, and we want the king out of here." That's the sort of feelings that we're getting here, the strength of opinion you're getting among the ordinary people. Now, the opposition politicians are saying that what they want first is some sort of commitment from the government, from the ruling family, that they're serious about making concessions, that they're serious about talking about constitutional reform. They say they haven't had that yet, and that's why, although there's this offer of dialogue, no one's actually sat down to talk about anything yet.
Well, that's James Bays in the Bahraini capital, Manama. It's a different story in Yemen, in the capital, Sana'a. Our correspondent, Hashim Akhalbara, and he sent us this.
After being criticised by international human rights organizations for the brutal clampdown unleashed on protesters, President Saleh pledged to ensure the safety of the media and the pro-democracy reformers. In a surprise move, the chief of security in the capital, Sana'a, met with the students at the university and told them that from now onwards they would be free to demonstrate without being harassed or attacked by mobs and pro-government supporters. We don't know whether this is a genuine attempt by the president to diffuse tension or just a tactical move. However, some members of the ruling party warned President Saleh that unless he puts an end to this violent actions against protesters across the country, they would resign from his party. In the city of Aden, a hotbed of dissent, a senior member of the secessionist movement has been arrested by security forces. This is very tense now in the country, a situation closely monitored by neighboring countries like Saudi Arabia or the Americans, who consider President Saleh a key ally in the fight against Al-Qaeda.
Go across the top of North Africa, heading west, and Morocco. It's a country that we haven't heard much from during the course of the last few weeks with all of the protests that have been going on. But apparently there have been some demonstrations in the capital, Rabat. Let's talk to Nora Fakim, a British journalist who happens to be there. Nora, tell us what you saw.
Hi, good evening. Basically, from 10 a.m. GMT, some 5,000 protesters took to the streets of Rabat today for a peaceful demonstration demanding a new constitution, a change in government and an end to corruption.
And how, you said about 5,000 there, what sort of response was it met with?
Well, the security force has been actually quite discreet. And there are several groups demanding change, and the atmosphere generally is quite calm and peaceful.
How big are the calls for change in Morocco? I mean, after what we've seen in Egypt, after what we're now seeing in Libya, are the people of Morocco energized by the events of the last few weeks?
Yes, I think some definitely feel that the protests in Tunisia and Egypt have had a big impact in Morocco. But this time it's more the people are more angry towards the government. They want a change in government, less power from the monarchy itself, and so that people can have their own needs.
And of course, in other countries, Nora, it was the fact that the protests continued day after day that gave them a certain momentum. I mean, it looked like there was a big crowd out there, considering the fact that it appears to me to have been raining. Are any other demonstrations in Morocco planned that you know of?
Yes, they're having demonstrations in Marrakesh and Casablanca. But I've been in Rabat the whole day following